Good day, everyone. I'm Petar Sabol, Sharp Eye, Sony Europe Imaging Ambassador, and today I will present my macro photos and bring you closer to my methodology and introduce you to the main problems that we encounter in macro photography. But I will also show the solutions for them. As you know, a branch of photography, macro is quite demanding to perform than, for example, portrait or landscape photography, because it's quite technically conditioned, and it requires great precision and attention to detail in order for the final result to be satisfactory. So what exactly is macro photography? It comes from Greek word macro, which means big. With macro photography, we enlarge small objects, and we call macro photography that covers the range from a reproduction ratio of 1:1, the true macro or real size, or 10:1 magnification, which goes to extreme macro actually. So this is, in short, the size of the projected image on the sensor. This is the word macro goes from Greek word. And we can break down into three parts. So we have three terms that we most often use when a certain object we take photograph. So it's close-up photography, macro photography, and extreme macro photography. As you can see, the close-up on the left upper screen is a butterfly that is more close-up. It's not true macro because it's not mathematically at 1:1 reproduction ratio. And on the right, you see a true macro 1:1 reproduction ratio. But as you can see, this is not a good frame because it's too much cropped into the frame. So it's much better to use the field for composition and not to bother too much with the mathematics. But for now, I will just try to explain how what magnification means and what we can achieve with these magnifications. So on the left down, we have now 3-time macro. So it's 3:1 reproduction ratio. And on the right side, it's a 5-time macro. As you see, this by close-up, we mean that photography is taken with any lens that can record the main subject to the foreground of the image that is sharp and occupies most of the image in technical terms. Is the use of the minimal focal length of the lens that it can optically allow. So under the term macro, we consider each photo is at the reproduction 1:1, as you can see on the right. So that means that if we use a full frame sensor that measures approximately 35 on the long side millimeter and 24 on the short side, and we shoot on object that is 10 millimeter or 1 centimeter long, it will be projected in the same size on the image sensor itself. So it will take about 1/3 of the frame. And if we want to zoom in on some subject to fill entire frame, we will have to shoot at it 3:1 aspect ratio, which means we need to get magnification of more than 1:1, as classic macro lenses normally allow. So to get magnification greater than 1:1, it's necessary to use extension tubes or rings or teleconverters. Of course, there are also macro lenses that allow magnification for up to 5:1 reproduction. This is for more extreme macro photography that is considered from 5 or to 10:1 and further. But if we go further, we go then in the area of microscopic magnifications and photography. So this is a bit more niche field of macro. So today we will talk about this normal macro and a bit extreme macro. So now we need to think in advance what we want to photograph and what equipment we will need to use. Experimenting with higher or lower magnification is always welcome, and it's very useful for those who are just starting with macrophotography. So what we can take with macrophotography? Usually these are small objects that naked eye cannot see, or it can hardly see. So any item inside or outside the house. Of course, there is a living or still life like plants, insects, birds, food, body parts, and so on. Because actually a lot of inspiration can be found everywhere. For example, it is best to start photographing so-called unavoidable cliches. And these are all common objects. That is object or subject that we find in our home or around the home on the yard or somewhere. So here are some examples that can be interesting at first. If nothing else, it can at least technically mastery of framing and experimenting with light and depth of field and so on. So I will show you now some examples that you can shoot anytime you want, because basically you all have it at home. So these are flowers, as you can see. These were shot with normal macro lens. In this sample, it was used the Sigma 180 millimeter. And this is more extreme macro, just detail of a flower. Shot with Laowa 25 millimeter. I will talk about the equipment a bit later. But for now, you will see this the fruit also. It's kiwi. The eyes, human eyes, or computer parts like electronics, and playing with drops of water inside the house. And here you can see the watch parts and the bubbles, textures. You can take photograph of the wood and the paint and the wood again, the frost in the winter, shells or stones. So many different items you can shoot, whatever you find near yourself, and can look quite interesting when you get this detailed macro photo. This is the roast. And so let's talk about equipment that I use or I have used before from my beginning. So, as you can see, I started with digital SLRs. It was from Sony A700 to newer models. Now there are mirrorless, of course. The latest I use is A7R Mark IV with 60 megapixel. It gives excellent picture quality, and lenses that are mostly the Sigma 180 millimeter, Sony 90 millimeter macro, Laowa that goes to 5:1 magnification is 25 millimeter, and also wide angle macro. I also use Trioplan, that is an uncommon lens. It's actually a portrait lens, but it creates one wonderful bokeh effect that I will show you later. And but also you can use even tele lenses, especially if you want to try to shoot insects in flight or something like that. And there is also use of teleconverters and extension tubes, which gives me much bigger magnification. Of course, there is a tripod, electronic rails, and reflectors that are really necessary, and you basically cannot do macro without these accessories. So these are the most common lenses that you will find that goes to true one-to-one magnification ratio with different focal length. So we have here Tamron 60 millimeter, from Sony there is 19 millimeter, then we have other lenses ranging in 100, 105 until 180 millimeter. So I did try use the close-up ring filters, but I found them not that helpful, because they are only sharp in the center of the image, while the edges are more blurred, so I tried to avoid them. But extension rings or extension tubes is a very good addition to achieve magnification greater than 1-to-1, and they are giving me approximately magnification of 3-to-1 magnification, and this is very good investment, and it's quite cheap. So my recommendations goes to this one. The teleconverters are good nowadays. They were not that good in the past, but if you use dedicated teleconverters, you will get good picture quality without many losses. Of course, you will lose some of the light, but the picture quality will remain very good. And the tripod is really need to have accessory. Without tripod, you actually cannot do serious macro work. And this is here is example of mounted extension rings with teleconverter and macro lens. It's a bit old system that I was using before, but you can get the pictures how it looked like. So this is much more modernized system. As you can see, there is a macro lens mounted on the electronic rails, and the latest Sony R7R Mark IV. So this is some standard equipment that I use for macro photography, but I have to mention also, so this is the electronic rail that I use. It's you can precisely adjust the movement, and for each shot it will take shot and then continue to move and take shot and so on, and so you can program this good aid for focus stacking, which I will explain a bit later. So now these are atypical lenses in macro photography that can give some very interesting result, and this is allow a 15 millimeter macro lens, which is wide angle, and it can focus from around 1 or 2 centimeters from top of the lens. It's a very interesting lens to shoot, because now you see this example is when 2 butterflies were shot with 180 millimeter, which is tele lens, tele macro, and on the same scene was shot with 15 millimeter wide macro. So they can give completely a different look and perspective, as you see. This is also one interesting shot with wide angle macro. And now pay attention to this. This is these 2 butterflies were shot with this wide angle, and the next picture is shot the 180 millimeter macro. So you get the idea how different lenses can change completely the perspective and the look of the final image. And this is actually the same scene. It was shot in different, maybe difference of 5 minutes. So when I mounted the different lenses, and so, and there is also one quite interesting lens that is quite old. It's made maybe 60, actually 70 years ago, but with its optics, it creates this sub-bubble bokeh, and very, very interesting lens to use. It only makes this effect at fully open aperture at 2.8, and but it creates one wonderful bokeh. Everything that in the background shines, it creates these highlights with these circles, which are very lovely to see. So this is these are samples of made with this lens. And this is the one pictures you can get only once in a lifetime. So the equipment that I use and useful accessories that should be taken with you when you're going to work in the field. So definitely rubber boots are something that we need to protect ourselves from dew and water, because in the morning, obviously there will be wet grass, so you don't want to be wet. Small chair is very useful because you want to be comfortable when working from below, and tent or something to store your photo bags or something like that, and to preserve from water, or maybe, I don't know, something came up. So a dust blower and these electronic rails, but also markers, and also these little light reflectors are very useful because I quite a lot to use in the shoot in the backlight. So where I find the motives, as you can see, obviously these are meadows, forests, ponds, lakes, that we can find a lot of insects and living beings. So since I mentioned photographing living beings from nature, I want to emphasize that all photos of insects, which I show you here, either or on social networks, exhibitions, or other media, are taken in nature and with certain code of ethics that I carry inside my being and adhere to from the very beginning. So we need to treat all living beings with great respect, and when photographing them, I do not subject them to any form of harassment or torture, as is unfortunately the practice with some characters. I will not intentionally tell photographer, because to be nature photographer, then we have to follow the basic rule, and that any form of manipulation that may harm or injure the subject must not be obtained for photograph. Only true law for nature and such attitude towards the nature can yield such photographs. So everything else is just self-deception. I am not interested into studio photography or of dead insects, and I do not present any interest of challenge for me. So therefore, I actually never practice this. So this has to be respected, and no harm has to be ever done to insect in order to get a photograph. Now this is a one sample where we have doing the workshop of macro, and I would like to give an accent to how to get the most of the macro photograph. First of all, more experienced photographer of nature have to follow the forecast, because it's very important to know what expect next day on the forecast, what temperature will be, and the wind or something, because it's very important to know, to plan your shooting. So now you see the dragonfly on my arm was flying, and you can see him even on my head. It was actually a very very warm day, and you can find them around lakes and meadows or anywhere around water. So this is some little pond where dragonfly usually begin to emerge. And if you take a more close look at the plants and wings along the water, you can come across the exoskeletons of dragonflies that already done the metamorphosis, as you can see here. And these are the scenes where the dragonfly emerges out of this nympha stage and go out to become the adult. And you see the wonderful metamorphosis of dragonfly here. There is also one sample how they go out. This is a smaller damselfly. And now we have a butterfly. Butterfly are most often found on top of the flower or grass. And these are some just samples how you will much easily find them in the nature. So I found this one in the top of the grass, and it was shot with phone. And the next photo is that I made with camera and macro lens. So there is quite a bit of difference when shooting with true equipment for macro. Now, going for shooting. As I mentioned before, the weather forecast is very important, and you have to watch this at least one day in advance, because of two significant factors that can influence your maybe possibly successful photo or not. So this is the air temperature and the wind, because with lower air temperature in the spring and summer days, it can be in early morning quite fresh. So lower temperature is putting insect in sleep mode, like hibernation, and their activity is reduced to minimum. So they will only make a slight move here and there, maybe perhaps weeping tiny drops of dew from their eyes, and will not take off or when they do not reach the operating temperature, to say. So such situations are actually very welcome for a macro photographer, because when you have the low temperature, you will successfully shoot the living insect because he's actually sleeping. And then the wind. If there is wind, there will be very difficult to make any good photo. With wind, it will be your enemy every time, and there will be a situation, in fact, that just everyone will face it when try to shoot macro. And because of all this, you have to be very patient and persistent, because this is the most important factors when shooting macro. Good weather when is still, so no wind and quite low temperature, and you will for sure get a good photograph. So now as we go on the middle, it often happens that we don't find just one insect, or we find several insects, and now we go maybe 15 or 20 meters away, and we cannot any longer remember where we saw the insect. So what to do now? So then I take these markers, like improvisational flags or something, to stick them in the place where I found the interesting motive. And then you have opportunity to choose between maybe one or more subjects that you will shoot. So as we are on the field in the early morning, light is a very important factor. Actually, it's the most important factor, because first rays of sun that appear on the horizon are always the most beautiful, and they are mild and they are the best for the photo. It can give more drama, or when I work in the backlight. So now I will show you some samples how this can look really, really nice. So this is a swallowtail butterfly and a pair of dragonflies that are resting in the morning, and using this backlight can give you really nice effect. So then I often use the small light reflectors that I was mentioning before, and you don't even have to use a flash or external flash unit, because with excellent dynamic range of Sony sensors, I can extract detail from dark parts without showing noise. So some samples more to enjoy. Dragonflies, butterflies, these are the most common subject that I shoot. So now let me show you the sample how background can actually change quite quickly in the color. Now these butterflies, the very same, just a little bit angle that is different here, and you can see how light can change. And now the sun came up and everything goes into a golden tone, but it's the very same butterflies at the very same place, and you can get very different pictures. And here is also one example to show you the background, because the background is very important as the subject as well. As you see, the color can change dramatically, and even a slight change in the angle that you position your camera and lens can lead to very different result. So now I will show you how I can improve background, better background. So I have used at first the metal bar, and later came out with the idea of telescopic magnet that can be adjusted in height and around the axis. So I fastened this to a metal base, and then I fixed the plant of a butterfly that is found on a stem or some flower. So now as I put butterfly together with the stem, and then I fix this on this magnetic telescope. So now I reduced the effect of wind because the stem won't move too much. And as you can see, this is the final result. And so I did not disturb the insect. Everything was on its place as it was. And I managed to get a much better background because he was too low. So I couldn't reach with my camera and lens. So I just place it a little bit higher. And then I can rotate myself around the subjects, and this way I can get much better background. So it's quite useful trick to do. And this is a crop of the image. Now I would like to mention that with focus peaking and focus magnifier, I can get a lot more comfortable control and larger and accurate display when I use Sony Xperia phone, which can, with its 4K display, give me much more sharper and more perfectly focused place on the subject. So I can even remotely control the camera with this. So it's a good addition for to have a bigger screen when shooting macro. And also I can transfer files just immediately after I take the shot to share along with the community and so on. And now there are also some sample of my macro works. These are dragonflies and butterflies when mating. You can even see one mosquito that landed on the wings, which is quite interesting. And you will often find very interesting motives and situations in the nature. Once you start to search in the nature and take a look for macro photographs. Stag beetle and damselflies playing around, and dragonfly from above. So one small dragonfly and a little damselfly hiding, and a butterfly and two butterflies. So now we have always a problem in macro photography with the depth of field. So this is the part of the image that is sharp and in focus. Everything else in the background will be very much blurred and will not be sharp. So no matter how much you close aperture, you cannot give everything in depth of field. So this is the most common problem in the macro. And there is never enough depth of field in the macro photography. So then we use focus stacking technique, like merging multiple focus or exposures, as you like, to get the required depth of field. Now, you see here is the example of a stacked image, maybe 200 of them, and how the final look can be dramatically improved that when you have all in the depth of field. So now you see this is an animated GIF that shows how the camera moves and the focus will and depth of field changes. So we need to take a couple of and then the final image when it's stacked together. Now this is a dragonfly portrait, sorry, and the final result is this. So by moving the focus from the nearest point, we will cover the desired area of depth of field. Each shift requires the shooting of one photo. So this is best done with using focusing rails, especially if you have electronically controlled ones, that will be the best. So you will get the time lag between each exposure and the number of shots and speed of movement a lot faster than if you do it manually with focusing ring on the lens. So now we have a photo focus on the nearest point from the lens, and we select then focus further, and you can see how now the first part, the nearest point, is start to become blurred or out of focus, and other parts are that as I go further are getting sharp. So now, once we covered all the shots with the many exposures, then we stack the image, and the final image looks like this. It's much better looking than only slight tiny little in focus. I will show you now how to do that in Photoshop. So we go to File and Script and load file into stack. So then we choose to browse the images that we will use after we, of course, did the conversion from a RAW file and so on. And then we select all these images and then go back to Edit and Auto Align Layers. After the operation is done, then we go back to Edit and then Auto Blend Layers. After that, it will we press OK. And once this is finished, we go to Flatten Image. And that's it. So, in order to make a successful stack, it will often make you required to make you maybe 5 or 6 set of to have at least one good that will be fine for later processing. So when I'm done shooting, I start processing RAW files where I adjust all the parameters to convert them to TIFF, and then after I use TIFF files to in a Photoshop or in a Zeren Stacker, which is one specialized software for merging these photographs in macro. So it requires fairly powerful computer, and it can take a bit of time, maybe sometimes a couple of hours to finish all this, because sometimes I can even shoot to 500 images. But there I did it only a couple of months. In average, there is around 150 to 200 photos per stack. But you see, sometimes is you want exactly the opposite situation, to shoot some close-up of insect with fully open aperture, which will give you a background completely blurred, but main subject will remain sharp. So now these are some samples that I make with open aperture to pronounce more blurred background, as these are more a bit white shots. So now we go to part of extreme macro. For this, I use equipment, as you see, the most often is use this Lava 25mm that goes from 2.5 to 5 to 1 reproduction ratio. And then I can combine Sony 90mm or Sigma 180 with extension tubes or teleconverters. And of course, there are these extension tubes, tripod, and electronic rails. And this is the lens that I just mentioned. So, and sample how flower can look like. Very detailed, and the horsefly and horsefly from side. And as you can see, this is very, very large magnification. I have used here the teleconverter with 2 time, so and a bit of extension tubes, and that gives me a reproduction of 12:1. So it's a very, very large magnification, and therefore I have to use very, very small steps, like maybe 10 micrometer for each shot while doing focus stacking. Now, I show you example of dragonfly portrait, and they are beautiful compound eyes, because when zoomed in, you can see many these tiny eyes that are really impressive to watch and see. And if you're lucky, you will find them covered with dew in early morning. And this is more close, around, I think it was around maybe 7:1. This is one 5:1 reproduction ratio of damselfly portrait, and now the series of them. So you can see even in the reflection of these little water drops, the world. And you can combine this all with different colors. Of course, you can combine background to put something in the behind them, but most usually I don't use any how to say man-made things, but I often use just a flower or a plant that give you a more natural color. So, and in this example, I have been using my hiding tent for birds, which is in a brown tone, but can give you, when having this special lighting, interesting results. So experimenting is always welcome when doing macro. And now we have damselfly portrait, and from the side, these are very detailed image. It's 10:1 magnification ratio, and this is one of the first shots that I made last year with new Sony 7R Mark IV. And this is a making of picture of this hoverfly, and the final image is looking like this. I think it took quite a lot of shots, I think over 200 to get everything in depth. So it was it has to be very still. And as you can see, this butterfly here on the flower and the portrait of him. So now we have a damselfly, and the final image was looking like this. Very beautiful, because he was standing still after he was cleaning his eyes. I even have a video of this when doing this cleaning of themselves and preparing to fly. So when doing macro, you actually don't have too much time, because once they start to move, they will soon take off. So you have to be very quick, but also very careful not to disturb, because every move can make them scare, and they will fly or something away. So here are samples of damselflies. Again, my most common subject that I take photos. And here is a roverfly. Many of these photos were already awarded in photography competitions. And this one is made with normal macro lens with Sigma 180, but combined with the extension tubes and teleconverter. So you can see how much you can gain with this combination. And here are an example of the details of the dragonfly wings, which are beautiful in color, and details are just amazing. So this is a dragonfly wing, and you can make many compositions just when taking a photograph of just one part of the insect, and this can be very nice and artistic way to express in photograph. Also, one older lens that was using at the beginning, it was Mitacon lens, and the spiders can look somewhat scary to somebody. I hope they will not be scared too much. And this is a 15:1 macro. That is, I think, the pitches that I achieved so far, combining the extension tubes and teleconverter. And now these are scales of butterfly wing. They can look very interesting and amazing, very colorful. And I'm sure everyone who wants to improve their skills or just start in macro, that will be interested when showing these photos. So, because you will discover a completely new world, and you will discover in nature how you will learn a lot of things when shooting nature, especially macro or birds or something, which is that I encourage you, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. So now you see this butterfly, and the part of this wing here is here magnified to 5:1 magnification. So you get the idea how much is now. If you take a look into middle of the butterfly wing, and now you see the details and scales on the butterfly wing. Also, this is head of butterfly and eyes, many compound eyes. And this is a portrait of bee while sleeping. And the aphid family on the leaf, you see bigger mama aphid and little ones. So it's a whole family. And this is a dragonfly, one last picture that I will show you for this workshop. So that's all from me, and I hope you have interesting time with me, and thank you very much.